Hi everyone, thank you for joining us this evening. Happy St. Patrick's Day to anybody celebrating out there with their dogs tonight. I'm Nikki, and this evening we have Suzanne Clothier, almost said it wrong, joining us from New York. So a little bit of a time difference, and I didn't even ask you what the weather was like. I'm assuming it's quite cold at the minute.
No,
right?
it's actually it's balmy mud spring weather. It'll get cold again, but it was
It's a
sit on
nice,
the steps and listen to the birds and watch the mud flow by.
good day, a good day.
Lovely.
Thanks for joining us anyway. This evening we are going to talk about arthritis and the effect it can have on dogs' behaviour and how you might be looking at changes in training them, how you spot these changes. But before we go any further, just a couple of things I want to do is firstly thank Big Barker for sponsoring our live this evening. Big Barker make some fantastic beds that we have lots more information about on our Facebook page. And then I'm just going to hand straight over to Suzanne, if that's all right with you, just to talk to us a little bit about what you do. I mean, we've just been having a chat, so much information, so much stuff that we're going to learn this evening. But if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and letting us know what you've been up to in the last couple of years. I say couple of years.
Years, months, days. Someone once asked my husband, "How's your wife?" He goes, "I have no idea. I haven't seen her in like 2 hours." And they said, "Well, what does that mean?" He said, "I could go home and she's going to say, 'We're moving to Thailand to breed pygmy elephants.'" And he'd be like, "Oh, are we?" I guess so. So, yeah, years by. So I'm Suzanne Clothier. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's quite an honor because, as I was saying to Nikki, I really love what Cam's doing and send a lot of my clients this way to learn more about arthritis and how it affects our buddies. So I'm a dog trainer. I've been professionally involved with animals since, I hate to say it, but since 1977. So I know some of you are like, I wasn't born yet. So don't say that out loud. Don't put that in the comments.
So 44 years exactly.
Oh yeah, you're my son's age. So a very long time. I've been involved with horses since I was 12 and have lived with, oh my God, a lot of different animals. We've got 7 shepherds. I'm a shepherd breeder of 11 generations now. We have Scottish Highland cattle. We have Gloucestershire Old Spot pigs. It sounds like I'm an Anglophile, which is true. I do love the British breeds. Horses, donkeys, a pony, cats, parrot, macaw, a cockatoo, tortoises, chickens, and sometimes turkeys. Yes, I think that's it for now. So it's a full house, and it's Dr. Doolittle's little sister. That's me.
We've got your little kitten in the background that you might hear occasionally as well.
Yeah, he's prowling like a stereotypy zoo animal because he's quite mad because I put him in a crate, but that's so you don't have to hear me yowl when he climbs up my legs with his very sharp claws. He'll survive. If he gets desperate, I will ask you all to hold and I'll go rescue the kitten from himself. I don't know if I'll let him out. I don't know about that. So animals is what I do. I wanted to be a horse trainer when I grew up, but I didn't have the money to be a horse trainer. So I made horses my hobby and dogs my business. It was easier to get started. And from my background, I've done everything from breeding to search and rescue, obedience. I was one of the first trainers into agility. I was also one of the first trainers out of agility because I did not like what I saw in terms of demands on their body. But my horse background very strongly informs me as a dog trainer because I learned to assist vets in their soundness exams. The really horrible little sales barn I grew up in, they would literally take a truck to the auction on Thursdays. Saturday morning, I'd show up and they're like, go ride that one, go ride that. They were just trying to find horses they could flip. They were not high quality horses.
Yeah.
But I got to see a lot of soundness exams where the vets would come in for the purchaser and put the horse through their various assessments. So I got to learn a lot about this should be like this is healthy movement. This is a sign of a problem. And then, of course, on top of it, I got to ride those issues. So it's like, not only did that look weird in the soundness exam, but when you ride this horse, he is unbalanced. He is going to fall over if you take this corner. He is struggling to do the things you're asking him to do. So that gave me a really deep connection. And I just carried that forward when I got involved in the obedience ring, agility, confirmation, did the whole thing, showing at Westminster, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and I just thought, very interesting.
Mm.
The parallels are really, really good. And so that informed a lot of my understanding of the dog as a physical being. And then I took it another step further because I had swallowed the confirmation bias is that everything the dog does is because of muscle, because of skeletal
Yeah.
confirmation. And I began to figure out, it's like, well, that's just not quite true. Because I could take a horse who looks like this, and how I work him, I can completely change his muscling and how he moves.
Yeah.
I can't make a pony into a giant warm blood or something that's going to go win the Grand National,
Yeah.
but I can make him the most flexible, strongest, most balanced, symmetrical
Yes.
pony that he can be. So that started me down another track of thinking, well, why is that not true for dogs? Why, if there's no actual defect in the joints,
Mm.
but the animal's not using himself beautifully and well, why would I not just do that? Exercise with a purpose, like a deliberate application to help bring the dog back into balance or to
Yeah.
minimize the limitations that might otherwise really start to snowball for him.
Mm.
So
It's like
then,
you were saying earlier, we do that with people as well, don't we? And we do it with horses, we do it with people. Why wouldn't we? And
yeah,
we do it a lot now with dogs, but you were doing it a lot earlier than a lot of people were.
back in '92, I was running show handling classes, and I just got so tired of watching dogs not being taught the skills they needed to be competent in the show ring. They were just kind of hauled around and liver stuffed in their face. And um, I just thought, well, why don't you just teach them what you want them to do? Break it down to the skills they need to have. And so we did that. And one of the things that I did was assess each dog physically and assess their movement. It's like, okay, where do we have a lack of good biomechanics? Where are their muscles in balance? Where are they crooked? What do we need to do to assign them an exercise program that actually will bring out the best in them? So typically like cow hocks, or the hocks are facing each other, the knees are rotated out.
Yeah.
Not uncommon at all in thinking of some of the cavaliers that were in that class.
Yes.
Like you could see their knees looking right at their head, their knees were right here. It's like, I should not probably be seeing your knees next to your ears.
But you get so used to seeing them like that it feels like it's normal, doesn't it? But it's
exactly
not okay, but it looks very normal.
And that's what people say. It's like, oh no, they're all like this. It's like, no. What's the norm within a breed doesn't mean it's normal.
Yeah.
Meaning, how did nature intend for this animal to stand and move? So we would just assign them these exercises, and it was mostly some passive stretching, but it was mostly active exercises, whether it was serpentines around buckets or flower pots or garbage cans, depending on the size of the dog, or it was cavaletti, or it was controlled gymnastic jumping. So within
Can I just go back to anyone that doesn't know what cavalettis are? Can you just explain what?
So we can use cavaletti in a number of ways. And again, this comes out of my horse background. If I want to teach a young horse rhythm and cadence, I can give him evenly spaced poles that ask him to take a slightly longer step, for example. So I could ask him, can you drop your head and go over with a longer step? Because as a dog drops his head and neck, he frees up his front assembly so he can take a longer stride. I can't say to the dog, hey, for the next 10 steps, would you please take, 20% longer steps? I guess you could shape it, but you'd be a very, very old human by the time you get it done. Instead, we just give them these, not very high poles on the ground, and we're just trotting them over it. So it gives them a reason to aim. Because if an animal can, they will not hit something. Yeah. People are like, oh, he's just lazy. It's like, I know lots of lazy people. They don't smash into walls or hurt themselves. If an animal's hitting himself or he's knocking stuff down, there's a reason. So it was very cool because the people would go home and do this work. So I can either teach the dog to lengthen, so they have, stiff little movement, not a lot of reach and drive, or their back is really tight or hunched up. I can ask them to take these longer strides. Yeah. We have other dogs that, for whatever reason, there's a lot of factors, not really using their knees much. So they kind of have that full diaper waddle look.
Yeah.
And so they're they're just waddling back and forth.
No suspension in the back wheels. Then it's
no, they're just clearing the ground.
Yeah.
Right. But they're doing it in a way that biomechanically is going to put quite a lot of stress on the back, especially that midpoint where the thoracics, the rib cage, meet the small of the back, the lumbars.
Yeah.
So how can I say to a dog, hey, could you just march around for a while and, really lift those knees up? Because if I want to add more flexion and I want to add the strength to do that, they have to do that. So then we would go a slightly raised cavaletti. And so they had to do this. You can't go over cavaletti this way. So, the dogs that move like this, right? Their feet. So it's like, well, you can't go over a slightly raised object that way. Everything in the dog's brain says lift and go this way because you need to put that under your center line to stay balanced. You go over this way, it's kind of like riding a bicycle with your front wheel going back and forth.
Yeah, exactly.
So sometimes we would get these dogs who were decently constructed, but not in great shape in terms of their soft tissue and their movement. And then 8 weeks later, they would go out and knock the socks off judges. And people would say, where did you get that dog? Like, it's the same dog I had 3 months ago. And they're like, what did you do to this dog? It's like, well, we took him to Suzanne's class and then she gave us these exercises. So that was back in 92. So I've been on this kick that we can really learn so much about what's going on in a dog's body. And also, I think this is where humane training starts. It's one of my elemental questions, which is, can you? Literally, are you capable mentally, emotionally, and physically of doing this thing that I'm asking you to do? And we've gotten so carried away that as long as we're positive and there's cookies involved and we don't use any force and we're not harsh and we never say no, that therefore the dog can do it. It's like, that is a massively unfair assumption. So I need to know, what is it you're capable of, dog? And is there something I can help you to be more capable? Or do I need to recognize the limitations that you have and alter the world and the expectations? So 9 years from now, you're not paying the price for my unwillingness to accept your limitations. And this for me is humane training, is that we have the foresight and the knowledge to know what long-term will happen. The dog does not. No, he's like, I'm good. No, you're not. You're going to keel over. It's like, I can do it, Mom. Just let me. It's like, no.
No. And this is where you're very into sort of relationship-centered understanding, aren't you? That's your big thing.
Yeah.
Every dog is very individual, and we need to look at the whole picture about everything you've just said. Really, what you can do doesn't necessarily, just because you can do it doesn't mean that it's going to be the right thing for you.
Right. And it would be just as crazy as someone, I mean, I'm all of 5'2", right? We won't discuss how many stone I am, but enough, I could be a boulder. And so if someone said, look, I've got all this money and I'm going to be so encouraging as your coach and I'm going to turn you into a world-class basketball player. Well, everyone would look at us and say, like, you're mad. Like, you have seen her, right? Like, yes, but I have money and I'm very, very encouraging. I will never say a discouraging word towards. You're not going to change the fact that Suzanne is really small and she's not, she's rather round. But we do it to dogs all the time.
Yes, it's true.
Where we're not listening. I always say if dog people had horses, they would have fat Shetland ponies from their backyard that they say, I'm going to win the Kentucky Derby. It's like, but you can't. It's like, no, I'm going to be the first pony to win the Kentucky Derby. It's like,
and that goes back to the agility. You got into agility and soon got out of it because you could see what you've just explained, basically why you got out of it, because you could see this happening day in, day out, and you knew, or many people do realize once they have one dog, what happens at the end of that road, and then you can avoid it. You can help manage these situations better, can't you? If you
exactly. And knowing also what it takes to condition an athlete so they stay sound. So that's why I developed the Clothier natural jumping method. I was just trying to find a way. It's like, if you want them to be able to do this. And in those days, you only had maybe a total of 13 obstacles and maybe 6 were jumps.
Okay.
Nowadays, like, the number of jumps and repetitions and the reps and the speed. And I thought, but you haven't taught them how to jump.
Mm.
That would
Yeah.
be as mad as hopping on a horse with no training and saying, I'm going to
Yeah.
go do the cross country phase. Like, well, good luck with that.
Mm. And they'll
You're
do it
probably
because
going
it's
to
fun
die.
at the time, but it's really not. It's not going to be
Exactly.
fun.
So then I just thought, but we have to give them the skills, and we have to start with an understanding where they're at. And then above that, we have to recognize when the dog is telling us in his movement and his reactions and his behavior and his performance that we need to really back up and look carefully at what's going on in that body.
Yeah.
Because the answer is often there. It's not always between your ears. And
Yeah.
it goes unnoticed till it's extreme.
Yeah. And then it's too late to go back, isn't it? You can't change what you've already done. So
Exactly.
it's not true in every situation, but often it is the case. So
yes, once the damage is done, if it's long term, I remember a lady presenting me it was at the time she was one of the top agility competitors.
Sorry, just cut out slightly there. Are you still there? You're back. We're back.
I'm like, it's not good if I see just black with little swirlies on it.
No, that's fine. You're back. So what are the top agility trainers?
The dog's paw is this flat. She's presenting this dog with all kinds of jumping problems. He keeps knocking down bars and blah, blah, blah. So I look at this dog and his front feet, I'm not exaggerating, they have about as much arch to them as not a nice, healthy arch pads. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, the amount of stress it takes to do that.
Make them go like that.
To stretch those ligaments to such a point where there is no curvature left, right? And she says, so I want to know what exercises I can build it up. I was like, no, it's done.
It's not appropriate.
It's not, it can't be fixed. Once you have done that to ligaments, you don't get them back.
No.
And she said, but it has to be. There has to be something you can do because he still needs how many points for some championship. I'm like, no. And then it turns out she knew he was dysplastic.
But was still went ahead and did all of the agility.
Yes, when I looked at him, he was such a heavy downhill dog. And the only reason dogs go heavy downhill like that is they're either built that way. So we think of the bulldogs, the bassets, those guys. Otherwise, a healthy dog doesn't tend to carry that much weight unless there's a problem behind. So when I looked at him, I looked at the muscle atrophy, the way he used himself, the way he was reluctant to sit. He didn't want to go. And I said, have you had his hips done? She goes, oh, yes, they're just god awful. But I'm like, but there is no but.
No, at that point you stop.
Yeah. And you say, this is not the sport for this dog. He doesn't he doesn't have the joint function to do the thing he needs to do. I had to tell her once you've got that kind of
permanent,
you have that permanent stretching of those ligaments, it doesn't snap back. You can change muscling, but once you've had deterioration in a joint or in those really important connective tissues, you're not going back. And, the rule of thumb I always taught people is if you can easily see or feel bone, that means you're going to have very little you can do to affect the function.
Okay.
If it's hidden, like you think about your hips, there's a lot of muscling there. So when you can't easily reach the bone or it's surrounded by a lot of muscle, then you have some options in terms of improving function simply by keeping those muscles around it stronger. But that front paw is just like our hand.
There's nothing covering it in the first place. That's nothing.
There's just nothing.
No.
So
do you want to talk about a couple of the other cases that you have specifically about arthritis? Well, they're kind of about arthritis anyway, because I think what I want to talk about is more of the sort of behaviors that people might notice and why they might get in touch with somebody like you and say, look, I've got this dog, she's been great, and these behaviors are changing. What sort of behaviors are most common? What are you seeing?
So there's a couple. One will be changes in their social interactions. One will be changes that can manifest as aggression. And one is a change in actual training or performance. So we'll start with Wale was his name. He was a Belgian Malinois, lovely old gentleman. This dog like lived to work. He had the heart of a soldier and the courage of a lion. He was so precise and he loved what he was doing.
What kind
But
of work was he doing?
he was doing high level ring sports and obedience, competitive
Okay.
obedience. So he had been very, very precise. He really had been performing at this level for a long time. But suddenly he had started to, when he came into a sit or was asked to sit, he would sit, sometimes not a problem. Other times he would pop back up like within seconds, and
Yeah.
sometimes faster than seconds. It was like, oh, nope. And sometimes he'd yelp. So the vet, poked him and looked around. He's fine. He's just getting a little older. No x-rays were done. And I always encourage people, the best vets don't have x-ray eyes. The
No.
best vet on the planet is still not Superman. Just shoot a couple of plates and find out what's going on. So when they brought him to me, they said, let's see if he'll do it. So he did some healing and he sat and he held his sit and he was just a little perfect soldier. And then it happened. He sat and he just sprang back up with this yelp. And then he's like, I'm sorry. Like
oh, shame.
He's like, And I said, what have you tried? They're like, well, we've corrected him. That's not okay. Which just broke this dog's heart because he's like, I can't. I'm trying, but I can't.
I really want to please you.
And so he was this was their second home for this dog. So he'd been trained harshly by someone else, but who said, if he gives you any of this stuff, just don't let him get away with it. And that's the mindset, right? Instead of saying, why would this unbelievably cooperative dog who just does everything as perfectly as he knows how, why would he suddenly be like, yeah, I'll show you what. I'm not going to sit sometimes, and I'll also yelp when I'm doing it. I thought, ooh. So I watched him move, and I thought, please take him for another opinion. Please take him back to the vet. Ask them to focus on this area and this area. Because the other thing I saw, too, was that there was a lot of stiffness in how he used his neck. So he had limited range of motion. I thought, he should have much more fluidity in his movement. And it was really characteristic. He would crank really hard to try to look at them, but then when he wasn't under cue, he would drop his head again.
Right.
And I said, has there been any injuries? Because what I'm thinking is structurally, his conformation was good. It was really nice and solid. There was nothing there. But I'm like, he is not moving the way his structure says he should.
Yeah.
So something has happened here. It's kind of like having a beautiful door that doesn't open, right? And it's like, oh, well, yeah, we did have that problem with flooding, and then that jam, has swollen.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a beautiful door, but it can't open, or the latch is rusted shut. It's like, it should open. It's like, it doesn't. How come? And so, no, there's not been any accidents or injuries. Or I said, okay, take him to the vet and see what was what. And so what they found was huge bone spurs in his pelvis that if he sat in just the right way would slide between the muscles.
And
if he sat just the wrong way, just a hair, it actually, caused probably some nerve pain. So he rocketed back up. And they found bony changes in his withers and in the lower cervicals.
Okay.
And that was when they realized, he was in a car accident. And yes.
With the previous owner?
No, with them. He had slid off the seat, hit the lower part of his neck and shoulders against the dashboard.
Yeah.
And they, the vet checked him out and said, no, he's okay. He wasn't okay. And so that just had continued for 2 years to compound while he was still doing this high performance work.
Yeah.
So when they realized he was doing the very best he could, now can we give him some pain medication? We can't fix these bone spurs. Those are all the bony changes are what they are, but we can offer him anti-inflammatories, pain relief, and we can take off of his table the demand to work at this kind of intensity.
Yeah.
So no more having to stare in my face, buddy. I trust that you're there on the heel.
Yes.
You hold your head where you feel comfortable.
Definitely.
And it just made a world of difference because they said, should we stop working him? And I thought, now this is the tricky part with arthritis, right? If you stop completely, joints don't get their nutrition, right? They need to be used to
Yeah.
absorb nutrients. So there's that fine line. But then you also have
And
the
mentally as well. Just
quality of life.
yeah.
So it's like, no, I would keep working this dog. What I would eliminate or minimize are the things that were difficult for him. He had
Yeah.
no problem with drop on recall. He had no problem with retrieves on the flat. He had no problem with a lot of things. It was that sit and the holding of the sit. It's like, just have him come to a halt. Yeah, just don't ask for it. And
Teach
he's
him
like,
something else.
exactly. So he can still work and enjoy his old age and feel useful, and teach him more tricks, and just don't use those things that we know we can't change.
Yeah.
So he went on working till he was, I think, 14.
That's amazing. I mean, I guess in a way, it's kind of good that they were still working him, because they may not have picked up on those changes if he wasn't doing that. If he was just, you know, going out for his daily walk, doing normal household things, there may have been small things, but you wouldn't be able to put your finger on anything. So
Right.
I guess potentially being still in such a high level of working, it made it better for him in the long run. Thank goodness.
They saw it. Yeah. So that's the other thing that I think happens with arthritis, just like it does with us, is that it's insidious, right?
Yeah.
It's rarely a today I can walk, tomorrow I can't.
Yeah. It creeps up, doesn't it?
It creeps up. So you're like, you know, I forget. What did I have? I don't know, maybe last year sometime, I actually had like 2 glasses of wine. And I thought, oh, I forgot what it felt like to be pain free. I was like, no wonder people drink on a regular basis. I see now. My husband's like, was that news to you? I'm like, yes, I'm just so used to aches and pains in my body after a lifetime with horses and dogs that I just take it for granted. And it is insidious.
Yeah.
And it goes slowly. So we had this example with it was a border collie. I had worked with him briefly. An agility trainer had him, and the dog was fairly anxious. He was fearful. So he spent a lot of time, in this posture, which does take a toll on the whole body, right? It just means mechanically that all by itself can lead to tissue dysfunction. There's a really cool little book by Renee Callier, I think. It's super expensive, but it's called Soft Tissue Function and Dysfunction.
Okay.
And so he points out that you can get to soft tissue dysfunction, which soft tissue dysfunction will contribute to arthritis, right? Because things are not
not moving.
Right, they're not moving, and then it all goes sideways. But it can be an abnormal structure. It can be a normal structure receiving abnormal pressures. It can be a normal structure receiving pressure or stress that it wasn't ready for.
Yeah.
Or it can come from emotional causes. Will have the same, at the cellular level, the same effects as a mechanical insult or a physical trauma. Same degree. You can't actually tell at the cellular level which prompted it. So that's interesting.
Yeah. That's quite unbelievable, isn't it? You wouldn't imagine that could be the case, but they're so intense, these dogs. They're so anxious and affects their posture so much.
Right. So I knew that he had a lifelong issue of being fearful and anxious. So he had a constant tension in his body. He wasn't the most well-built dog, to say the least. So he was already working, behind the 8 ball. And they decided just to retire him. He had a new dog that was young and healthy and blah, blah, blah. So they let this old guy retire. And I get a call out of the blue saying he's bitten my mother-in-law's foot quite badly. And the recommendation is that we put him to sleep. And I thought, but why? Why did he bite her? What was happening? How did her ankle get in his foot, etc. And so tell me what was happening. So he's laying on the couch and the woman's reading, and she had her shoes off, and she was just, because you know how nice that dog fur feels sometimes against a bare foot. She's just stroking him, and then out of the blue, chomp. Not just chomp, but chomp, 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 chomp.
Really? And never done anything like that before?
No. The most he would do is snap fearfully and just move out of range. He just please don't look at me, touch me, whatever.
Yeah.
I thought that doesn't make any sense. That makes no sense at all. Unless, and this is what I'm constructing in my head as a trainer by phone, is unless a lifetime of that tension and poor
Mm.
structure and a fairly rigorous agility demands, if we have arthritis going on in that spine,
Yeah.
I'm not sure he has the best hips either, but I don't have X-ray eyes, just a guess.
Yeah.
If when she's doing this, as people do, they tend to do it without awareness, right? That feels
Yes.
nice. That feels nice. That feels nice. She's actually paying attention to the reading.
Not looking at his face or body movements or anything.
Exactly. So if he stopped breathing and suddenly, gave her the hairy eyeball and said, "You should stop doing that," and then curled
Yeah.
his lip and said, "You need to really stop doing that,"
Yeah.
and she's not even aware there's been any change. Yep. And it turns out, I said, "This is what I think happened. Now go ask your mom."
And it
Right on,
was.
right on the money. I said, "Get him to a vet, and please don't euthanize him yet. Maybe
No.
you'll have to, but can we get some X-rays?" And
Yeah.
so what he had was just tremendously degenerative changes in his hips and all through his pelvis and the lumbars. So there was a great deal of arthritis. So this touching and petting in that area
Yeah.
really just
He just
became
reached that level where he was like, "Ow, this is too much now."
yeah.
Maybe he'd been trying to tell them before, but the signs, go unmissed, don't they? If you think it's just an anxious dog.
Yeah, it's like, "Oh, he's always like that." And and when anyone says to me like, "Oh, he doesn't like it when you pet his butt," or he doesn't want his head touched, he only wants his butt touched.
Yeah.
I always think, why? Because that's sometimes a nice dog's way of saying, "Please don't touch that part of me.
Yes.
How about why don't you touch this part of me? This part's good." Or
Yeah.
rub my belly because my belly doesn't hurt, but when you touch my butt, ow, I don't want you to. So sometimes it's as simple as that. Whereas a dog who's comfortable in his body, assuming that he actually likes people and being touched, there's always a big assumption, won't have any painful response. And I always tell people, like, here, try it on the inside of your arm, right? Poke yourself. It doesn't
Yeah.
hurt. Like, push really
No.
hard. Very
It's
few
annoying.
people. It's annoying, but it doesn't really hurt because
No.
very few people carry any tension there.
Yeah.
But if I
Yeah.
can now take your finger on top of the muscle between your neck and your shoulder and push down, ow.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
People are like, ow. It's like, yes, and you did that to yourself. So
Yeah.
imagine if someone came over and decided to handle you and paid no attention to what you had to say. At some point, you might take a swing at them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it is insidious. It
Yes.
really can be insidious, and you just think, "Oh, he's getting older."
Yeah.
And
Yes. I mean, that's such a common thing that we hear all the time. I mean, you must hear it too. Behaviors change. We're slowing up. He's just getting older. No, he's not. It's not that. Do something.
Yeah, as we were talking, I have a almost 14-year-old shepherd, and I'm just so amused by her because at 14, she still has she's got a pep in her step. And watching her come up the stairs last night, and I thought, unlike some other dogs that I've had that got to this age where they were struggling to get up the stairs and needed some help, Spider's still under her own power, and off she goes. And when she goes out in the woods, and she still can do pretty much anything she wants. She's just lost some muscle tone because she's getting to be older. And so we have her on just, some moderate support for the joints because, as you know, when joints get older,
they need it.
Nature's determined to take us out one way or t'other.
Yeah.
So it's like all that lovely joint lubrication you had when you were a kid, no more for you. You're old now. It's like, what? Yeah. But I need it. It's like, too bad.
So. But the nice thing is that once you know that there's a problem there, and you can even localize it to the spine or the hips or whatever, there is so much you can do. And a lot of what you do, I suppose, is involved with that. There's the vet side of things with the pain relief and the x-rays of getting there. But then, like you were saying at the beginning, you go back and change the way they move, potentially, or help them change the way their muscles work, their joints work, in conjunction with all those other things to try and help their pain.
Yeah. And, all the different modalities as people would say, well, what's the best way to help my dog? It's like, what's the best way you can get healthy motion back in there? Whatever that is, do that. So is it swimming? Is it acupuncture? Is it chiropractic? Is it body work? Is it massage? Is it laser? Like, what do you have available to you that the dog says this works for me? And that's the ultimate answer, right? Does it work for the dog? And so the third thing I want to say is when you have dogs that there's suddenly their interactions with other dogs change. It's one of the biggest warnings. The dog that really loved his housemates or really enjoyed playing with other dogs and now says, no, I'm good. I'm going to sit over here, or I'm going to get really grumpy when they get really wound up.
Yeah.
Like, why? And so one of the things that I try to help trainers that work with me understand is when you don't have good control of your body, and anyone who's ever had, back issues or what I call an invisible injury, you show up in a cast, people are like, oh Lord, what'd you do to your leg?
Yeah.
The invisible injuries where you're carrying around a lot of pain, you're like, stop. Like, whoa, things are getting too active. It's like, no, it's okay. It's like, it's not, because I cannot move quickly out of this situation.
Yes.
And if you jostle me, it may be unbearably painful. So we get protective. So that's one of the things that we'll see sometimes is that as they don't have good control of their body and or it's more painful, right? These changes start to limit, it's not just pain, it's their ability to negotiate safely out of a situation or even to navigate a surface. I used to think that you're running up and down stairs. I do now.
Yeah.
Is there an elevator? And it's not that I can't do stairs. It's just that I know, like, if I had to come down or go upstairs fast, I'm in trouble. So that's always worrisome to me, right? It's going to hurt. I could actually be at risk of falling. And so the same is going to be true for dogs when they say, like, now, because I get a lot of calls about inter-household aggression. It's like, he was great with the puppy. They were best friends. And now it's like, that is my first warning sign. Please go get a wellness exam.
Yes.
And please ask your vet for baseline x-rays.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we don't have, and they're like, oh, well, he has arthritis in his spine. Or it's like, oh, his hips were not as good as we thought. And everyone assumes if they're not breeding them, no one has to check hips. It's like,
yeah, I mean, it's a lot more common than you think it is, I think, because we don't go ahead and x-ray every single dog that comes through the door. So you don't know exactly how many dogs are suffering with underlying, even if it's to a mild extent, underlying hip issues like dysplasia. But
we assume they're normal. Like, he's fine. It's like, he's not limping and in pain. And to be fair to some owners, the skill level in some small animal vets is relatively low. If the dog's not limping, or there's not heat or swelling or some really profoundly obvious signal, then the vet's like, oh, he's okay. They wing him around like that and like, see, it all works. I'm like, see the dog's eyes crossing like, oh, not really.
No. Yeah, and then you just think, a lot of people say, oh, he's always like this at the vets, don't they? So it's okay. He's not painful. It's just like, he's always like that. He's always a bit tense or goes to bite when you extend the hip. It's just because he's at the vets. But it's not.
Exactly. So then we the goal would be, and this is why I'm just so in love with what you guys are doing about education. It's like, can we learn to watch movement? Can we learn, first of all, what's normal, truly normal, not average for your breed or this type of dog, but what's actually correct movement? This is what nature intends. This is how this limb is supposed to work. Just pure biomechanical reasons. And it sounds very fancy and complicated, but it's not. In my video, Your Athletic Dog, that's exactly what I'm teaching you. Watch for these things, because these things will be true whatever breed you have. So that we then know. Sometimes I'll ask people, do you think this dog, has any problems with his knees? And they're like, no. And I'm watching that I've watched the dog, and he moves like, he's on stilts. There's nothing. When he sits, he props it over to the side.
Yeah.
It looks like someone with bad knees on an airplane where they're trying to keep that leg not flexed. And I said, oh, and did you notice, he only sits for 4 or 5 seconds, then he slides into a down or he stands up. They're like, oh, he's like that. It's like, no, there's a reason. There's a reason that's happening.
But if you can't recognize abnormal if you don't know what normal is in the first place, can you? That's what it comes down to. You just have to keep looking at dogs all the time.
And know what to look for, like what is that? What does that mean? What are we actually seeing? And so I'm just so thrilled. Like I said, in 92, I was off doing this stuff. In 95, we published Your Athletic Dog, and then took it out of print because people were like, we don't need to know that. I was like, what do you mean you don't need to know this? Like, you're asking, that's what he takes to work, his body.
Yes. Yeah.
If it's not working, how can you be a humane and positive trainer if
Mm.
you ask him to do what he cannot do?
And I think it's even more important now because so many more people have dogs than they did then.
Yeah.
And even in the last 2 years with COVID, so many more people got dogs. And then that led to a whole surge of breeding, maybe not as responsible breeding as had been going on. So in 10 years' time, we're going to be in a really bad place. So it's really good to identify issues now while we can do stuff about them.
And we have so many more modalities. When I was doing Your Athletic Dog and teaching that seminar a lot around the US and Canada, it was really interesting because the chiropractors could always tell if I'd been in their town, because on Monday morning their phone would like ring off the hook. They're like, you should charge kickbacks. Like, oh my God, our phone went crazy. They're like, what's the, oh, was Suzanne in town? It's like, yes. So it's really good because back then they looked at me like I was crazy. I've had vets say like acupuncture, it's just placebo. It's like, well, magically that placebo allowed my dog to jump into the truck after her acupuncture session.
Yes.
But all right, I'll let her know it's just a placebo. And chiropractic. And so these were modalities that were much harder to come by. I mean, we sometimes had to drive 4 hours each way to find a holistic vet who used this or that technique. Nowadays, man, depending on where you live, you may not have to spit very far to go to a rehab center that has a pool and it's got fit paws and it's got someone who's trained in physiotherapy. It's like, all right then. So let's get the knowledge to go with it. So that we know. But nowadays, between medications, supplements, and all of the physical, therapy that's available, oh my God, it's such a sweet spot to be in.
It's a good time to be a dog if you've
got a smart owner.
I was about to say, I was like, how do I say this for you? Yeah, exactly. A smart owner.
An informed, enlightened owner. It sounds really smarmy, but it's true. Like if you're aware, and getting people to know from their own bodies, like, oh, you look fine. It's like, but you're not, right?
Yeah. Like with the back pain you described yourself, it's, you feel that. Why wouldn't your dog feel it? But yet carry on doing their 5-mile walk every day. They would do it.
Well, that's what they say. I always tell people at the beginning of the seminar, they'd be sitting in some horrible seminar room chair, right? Which, after 8 hours is, you're thinking, why didn't I bring my own sofa? And I say, so, why are you willing to do this? Who here doesn't have any pain in their body? And there's always one. And she's always like in yoga pants. And she's part pretzel. And she's like, I don't have any pain. And then the rest of us look at her and think we're going to put you in the dumpster at lunch. It's okay. And I said, did you do yoga? It's like, yes. I'm like, oh, it's just a guess. The rest of us is like, we're in pain. Like, yes, who took medication this morning so they could be functional? It's like, whether that's Breakfast of Champions, ibuprofen, or, a serious prescription med, and who sees a physical therapist, who goes to a chiropractor, massage therapist. And it's like, okay. It's like, but why are you willing to sit here for 8 hours? You have all that stuff going wrong in your body. Like, it's interesting. I said, oh, well, we're going to change this. This is actually about tax law for the dog professional.
Right.
So we're going to begin with section 102.3. I just go into this droning tone. I'm like, at what point do you think, oh, at the first break, I'd love to stay, but I've had a back problem. And, I'm going to thank you so much. That was a really interesting seminar. But if it's about something that you love, you will push through and ignore. Later that night, you're going to be icing your back or your knee or whatever. But the same is true for our dogs. If it's something they find really enjoyable and rewarding and pleasurable, they're like, I'm good. And later that night, they're like, don't bother me, puppy.
No. And then I'm going to bite your foot because now you're just stroking me and I don't like it. So
exactly.
And we've created that problem. Purely a human error there.
Well, there's lots of that. Why dogs and horses don't unite and kill us all is a mystery to me, but it speaks to the grace and mercy of both species that they mostly don't kill us.
Yeah. I think going back to, when you see these dogs and they've been to the vets and the vets say, yeah, we've done the movement, it's all fine. Often range of movement is okay when they're in the vets, but it's only when you actually see them walking, running, doing specific movements. Like I was talking about, like I like to see dogs doing a shake off and see how they do that. That's when you really get a lot more information. It's not always on the physical exam, is it? It's you have to do a little bit of work beforehand.
Yeah, because it can be just a specific thing. I mean, with this last litter of puppies we had, it was a winter litter, so I had to do about 5,000 laundry loads a day. It seemed like 5,000. It was probably just 6.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
all heavy rugs and blankets. And so I actually managed to screw up my rotator tendon in a big way. And I realized it when I reached down to pick up a grape that the cockatoo had thrown out of his cage. So I reached down to pick up one grape, not a carton of grapes, one grape. I was like, oh, I saw stars. It hurt so bad. And then I had to call my doctor and say, like, I think I really have a problem going on here. So yes, until it was in that specific movement, it didn't hurt. But just the right movement, it hurt like a son of a gun. And I've seen this with a shepherd we bred. He kept having this problem. Nobody could pinpoint it. X-rays showed nothing. Finally took him to one of the best orthopedic guys on the East Coast at Cornell. And he examined that dog for 15 to 20 minutes and came back. And he says, I can't find anything. And the owner was super observant. She says, I'm telling you, it's there. It's intermittent. He does it. And she said, I'll tell you what specific action triggers it. And that, when she said, it's when he's up and he's loaded, like if he's trying to breed a bitch or something, or to hop up into a deep, angle to a truck. And the vet said, okay, a very, very, very specific loading that only under that load did it show up. And then he knew what it was. So
and you still couldn't see anything on imaging? Nothing at all?
No. No, but there was already impingement on the nerve. You know what I mean? So an MRI I would have shown it, but just a flat out X-ray did not. Once she said that, he knew the only thing that could be true was it had to be in this area. This doing this under that load has to impact this.
Localizes it right down.
And then he could replicate it as soon as he heard that stuff. So yeah, I'm really looking forward. I think the new vets coming out they're much more open-minded. They're aware of more modalities.
Yes.
I think they're a bit more sensitive. I don't know that it's just because there's a lot more women. I'm just saying. Maybe that there's a reason racehorse trainers like women exercise riders, because they're more sensitive. They're listening in a different way. We're not going to try to muscle something because we'll lose. Most of the time. So.
No, I mean, Barbara's just written this question here that I'm going to pop up. So Barbara's one of our ambassadors and has a lot to do with Cam and Holly's army. She says, when they came back if dogs come back with clear X-rays, which is kind of what we're saying about that dog that ended up at Cornell, what would be your next step? Because sometimes X-rays aren't enough to identify the problem. Absolutely, like you just said, it's 100% true.
That's what I tell my clients. So it's good or bad. And back in the 90s, when they would say the vet X-rayed him and said there's nothing there, I'm like, oh, hell. Because it's easier to fix bone. And especially back in the 1990s, we did not have good options for soft tissue.
For CT and MRI type.
Yeah, and for any modalities to actually treat it. I mean, in the old days, it was crate rest him.
Yeah.
Which actually turns out not to be a very good.
Because everything else is just tightening up and not doing anything. Yeah.
It's like that row. That was our, and I used to fight that with clients and say, all right, you just had your knee repaired. Go ask your orthopedic surgeon if you should just lay in bed for 6 weeks while that heals. And of course, orthopedic surgeon's like, absolutely not.
No.
I know, but your vet hasn't caught up to that yet. Don't blame him. It's just the education. So if X-rays are showing nothing, the good news is that means we're talking soft tissue.
Yeah.
So the nice thing about soft tissue, we can't do much about bones. We can fix broken ones, right? We can plate them. We can do a lot of things to help. We can go in and even adjust the tibial angle and
your cruciates.
All this stuff. Doesn't mean you bring him back to 100%. You just try to get him as functional as he can be. And that's a misnomer. But if it's not on X-rays, now it's soft tissue. Now we need to find out what is imbalanced. what's too strong, too weak. It could be just these adductors are too strong, or the abductors are pulling this away from the body, or the dog doesn't have enough muscle strength here. He needs to work on balancing this out to stay fit. And it could be an ongoing struggle that conformationally he's predisposed to this injury. So I see a lot of hyperextension in the hocks, where these hocks are so straight. And it's like being double jointed, right? It's not painful, but what it causes is the stifle problem. Because as that hock should lock, as the dog steps on it, that hock should lock like a rock, and so should the knee. Those work together. In these dogs, it doesn't. So instead of locking, it just keeps going this way. So you get this tibial push into the knee, and that just starts to wear down your cruciate ligaments. Eventually, that becomes painful. But the originating cause, why a dog starts to move funny long before his knees actually hurt, is coming possibly from his hock. So then I start looking at, is it conformational, right? That it's not got malformation on x-rays just means we don't have abnormalities. It doesn't mean that
it's definitely okay.
That it's correctly structured. Right? Depending, especially in a young dog where you don't get remodeling changes yet. But then I know if it's soft tissue, it's like, okay, now I start to explore, what do I need to do? Do I need to strengthen? Do I need to rebalance? Do I need to add flexibility? Do I need to change the dog's job? That this is not ideal for him, and his muscles are saying, we can't do this. This is not working.
Jump like this. Can't.
Exactly.
No, it's a really good point, because sometimes I think a long time ago it would have been like, x-rays are fine, just keep exercising, keep doing what you're doing. And also the thing that I find quite frequently with dogs is that they're always pulling muscles, they're always holding up one leg, and we try and rest them, we try and do the right thing for them, but it's really hard when a dog starts to feel better. They're just off again, and it's really difficult. So if it was you, like when I did my cruciate ligament, for example, you're building up very gradually, and you can tell yourself, some days you think, I can do more than this, but you shouldn't, and you eventually get back to walking properly. But I think with a lot of dogs, that damage that's done then, although they seem okay, they start to walk differently. They're shifting their weight slightly differently, and that's a permanent thing. And then it's not until a few years later that they maybe come to you and you see, well, that muscle's not been used like properly for a good 2 years. So it is important, isn't it, we should be, whenever we've got any of these injuries, considering stuff like physiotherapy and trying to immediately get them back on track if we can.
Well, cruciates are such a problem that the insurance companies, most of them, if you've already blown one cruciate, they will not insure the other, because the actual odds in veterinary medicine are huge. The percentage of dogs who will now blow the other knee. Like, well, first of all, we have conformational issues that no one's looking at. So at some point, I'm going to find some vet who wants to do the studies on why these dogs are so prone to this. It's not just because they were neutered, not just because of this, but we have a hock conformation that's playing into it. But on top of that, if we just say, oh, he's okay. So I had a Schutzen 3 level Dobie, a traumatic injury. He was extremely well built, but it was a traumatic tear of the cruciate ligament. So that was healed, but he could not stay sound for his work whatsoever. So when they brought him to me and I assessed him, you could see the imbalance in the rear. And we measured him. One of his thighs was 1.5 inches smaller than the other. Now, in a human, if you've torn your own cruciate, a human PT considers 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, significant on a human. The circumference above the knee. So you can imagine this huge. Dog had like nothing here.
And a really bulky one.
He's trying to do all the work with the remaining leg, and he's like, no matter how skilled he was. But we brought that dog back to performance level. Some people say, oh, we've got him back. He's like, no. Is he back working at that competitive level? Because now we've truly repaired him. A lot of work to rebalance that leg, and there were no PTs then or vets that did it. So I just thought, I'm just going to treat you kind of like a human horse hybrid. And these are the techniques that would build muscle strength and work on that side and do this and that. And so, they faithfully followed my crazy dog trainer advice. I'm not a vet. I just act like I play one on TV. And just watch. it worked, and the dog went back and, was able to be competitive in the Schützen-3 ring, which is no small thing.
Right.
A big thing. And so I was really glad 10, 15 years later, they're like, hey, if we use force plates, we can tell that even though they look okay,
Yeah.
they're not walking the same. Like, well, you could
So
have
force
also,
plates is when you can see the percentages of the loading of the
yeah,
legs.
so this one has this many pounds of pressure and this one is like, but you could also see that. You don't need expensive force plates. Force plates just put a quantification and a qualification on what you're observing. So, your observations are valid. So now we can actually see that.
Yeah.
And so now we know if we've got cruciate injuries, then any good orthopedic surgeon is telling them this dog needs PT.
Yeah.
Because the dog will not automatically learn to walk,
No, the
properly.
cruciate's fixed, but you then need to reassess, go back to rehab. So Laura's written this about, it must be a bit like finding all the pieces from a jigsaw puzzle, which I think is a really good analogy. The owner has some pieces, the vet others, the physio, hydrotherapist, behaviours, etc., some more, and then someone has to try and put them all together. Yeah, and who is that someone? That's the really tricky thing. That's you.
Yes, that's me. I'm the little weirdo, make believe everything kind of sort of not really, because I just want to know. And so for my own animals, I've had to rehab cruciates with the lab chow cross. The day I adopted him, I looked at his structure and I thought, right, you're just a cruciate rupture waiting to happen.
Yeah, lab and chow.
Oh man. And it took him 18 months to blow the first one, and it took him 2 years to blow the next one. It's like he was gung 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 ho. He's just woo. He's like, I can keep up with the shepherds. Like, well, you can. It's going to cost you. And he was a difficult dog to rehab.
Yeah.
Not because he didn't like people, but it's just like, the winter he did it was all ice. So I'm trying to hand walk a dog on a slightly hilly farm on ice. It was great fun.
It's something else to take into consideration, isn't it? You don't even think about that kind of thing. But it's where you're going to do it. Yeah.
And then it comes down as simple as, I always tell people, really, truly teach your dog to walk nicely on a loose leash.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine, she said, I don't need that. My dog's beautifully behaved off leash. And I'm like, yes. But if your dog ever needs to be hand walked because of an injury, you're going to really wish you had. And it actually happened. And she emailed and she said, you were so right. I after walks, this dog hates me. I hate this dog. And she said, my next dog will walk on leash beautifully. So if he's ever injured, he can be hand walked. And that comes from a lifetime of having to hand walk crazy horses who are like, why am I on stall rest?
Yeah. It's a good point. And I'm exactly like your friend. I don't really put my dog on the lead because it would have taken some effort right at the beginning that I just didn't do, which is terrible.
Yeah, he's well behaved off leash. It's like, that's fine. But that skill at some point, if he needs to be hand walked, this is going to complicate things.
It's true. So true.
It's just like the husbandry and the cooperative care now. It's like at some point, your dog probably is going to have to be handled and not in very nice ways by people trying to help him. So let's give him some skills for that if we can. Because then the dogs that can accept the care are in such better shape. The dogs are just like, please, I will take the massage and I'll be happy to accept any of you want to give me because I'm not afraid of you and I'm not afraid of being handled. I think if I had an arthritic dog, that would be one thing I'd be working on is, can I teach them cooperative care so that we have all the options on the table for them?
Yeah. This is what they do with the guide dogs a lot, isn't it? The cooperative care, just so they are easily managed when they go to their new homes to do their job.
It is a skill.
We've got a comment here from Danella Marie. I see a lot of pain caused by years of pulling on the lead, and so many dogs are so tight up front from acting like the strong man pulling a tractor. So, I think what Suzanne was saying, a loose lead, and that is a real skill, isn't it? Getting them to walk on a loose lead. So then there is none of that pulling because Danella, it is going to cause a lot of damage.
It will. It distorts the normal movement of the animal so badly. Right. So if you go watch, like I had the pleasure of teaching at the Alaskan Dog Mushers Association as the keynote speaker, I thought, I don't know anything really about mushing. You know that, right? They're like, yeah, we know you don't. And that's fine. We'll take you mushing. You can learn something. But we think you understand a lot about the relationship between dog and people. That's why we want you. I said, okay. So they did take me mushing at some ungodly hour in the Alaskan cold, and it was fascinating to watch the movement of how the dogs use themselves in harness, because it was not the same pulling that we see on leash.
No.
So they were able to still travel true and straight and use their bodies very effectively. But on that video I was talking about, Your Athletic Dog, you see this little beagle, and we filmed him in slow motion, and what you see is the distortion of movement.
Really?
And so, yeah, so it's like pulling on lead is so deleterious to the dog's body that if you want to create an arthritic dog, knock yourself out, because I almost guarantee that's going to happen. It's extreme stress on the TL junction. That part of the dog's body that has a lot of movement. It's what makes
a lot of responsibility going on in that area of the body, isn't there?
Yeah. And then if we add they're out of weight, they're overweight, and their abdominals are not strong, and now we're allowed to pull, it's just a recipe for disaster.
The thing is, it makes complete sense as well. When somebody explains it, you're like, oh, well, of course. Yeah. I'm not going to do that again. But I've been doing it already. But I won't do it anymore.
We had a little experiment. I was working on a dynamometer, so that measures pounds of pressure for pull, right? So I thought, oh, this is my latest experiment. This is like 10, 15 years ago. So I got an engineer to take this very expensive dynamometer home and test it. So the initial pull, when he used the neighbor Springer, when this little 40-something pound bitch, when she hit the end of the thing, it was 166 pounds of pressure was put on her neck. And then it's insane, right? And so then he took a walk around the block, and the average was is almost double her body weight, constantly oppressed. Constant. She's working against that. And as you see, whether if you use I call them front pull harnesses, because dogs just pull sideways. That's that. And I say, oh, I've got a new thing at our doggy gym, where your dog gets to bend slightly sideways and really dig in. And he's going to do that for 20 minutes to an hour, every day. Is that okay? Also, we're going to put maybe 100 pounds of pressure on his collar.
And it's just so obvious that it's not okay.
People are like, no, what? No?
No? That's what you're doing.
That's what you're doing. It's called walking your dog. And we won't even discuss the changes in the pressure in the eyeball. In the little dogs, they've measured it where it exceeds glaucoma pressure pulling against the collar. So ask anyone. I'm really, really big on no pull. No pulling. No pulling, not for the sake of your body long term, not for the sake of our relationship where you're so disconnected from me and I'm from you. From so many perspectives.
Yeah, you can see
especially
it.
I once examined a dog. It's just an assessment. She was 13. I could not find the slightest twinge of discomfort in this dog's spine. It was as flexible and soft in all directions. And I said, how old is this dog? They're like 13. And I said, she spends no time on leash, does she? And the woman's like, no. I put her on leash when we go to town. I didn't ask that. Real life, does this dog spend any time on leash? She goes, no. She goes, I just drape a rope around her neck when I go to town so we don't get a ticket for leash laws.
Oh no, that's what it was.
So literally, this dog had never pulled on leash because she hadn't been walked on leash.
Oh gosh.
Unless they went to town briefly, and then it was just a make-believe leash because the dog was right there with her. And so this healthy, beautiful spine, and I do think part of what has kept my old girl Spider. She spent very little of her time on leash, and when she did, it was never with pulling.
No.
So, yeah.
Well, it's really it's a big area that you don't really. You get a puppy, you want to get them out on the lead, and it's easily done, to be honest, because you're so desperate. So you've got your vaccines done, you want to get your pup out, and you almost don't care because they're going to have a great time the first few times. It's not going to hurt immediately. Otherwise, they'd probably stop pulling. But yeah, it's understandable, but we should be trying.
And yet, if there was something if every time they did something, some blood came out, we'd be like, that can't be right.
Yeah.
But
it's a
hidden. There's no blood. There's no whining. There's no, if we saw a puppy, on ice skidding over and over again, we think, I don't want to do that. That's not good for my puppy's body.
Yeah.
but it's so common that we don't even realize it. So that's a really good point, Danella Marie's
Yeah.
pulling is just so not good. But you can't miss it on that little beagle. When we put it in slow mo, how it distorts
The whole
every
body.
whole body, the whole
Yeah.
body.
That's frightening. We've got another question from Sarah here. Have you seen an increased level of general barkiness in a dog with arthritis, almost like they're permanently in pain and therefore triggered more easily for anything remotely exciting like the doorbell ringing?
That certainly can be contributory because if you want to dive into the rabbit hole of pain and the whole wind up cycle, so there's a point where pain can be interrupted effectively, and then there comes a point where it goes into this almost inaccessible, so
Yeah,
that they're constantly there. I have some sympathy for dogs like that because I get migraines a lot, and so
that's a wind up
if
thing, isn't it?
if I don't hit it at the right time and take the meds or go lay down or whatever I'm supposed to do to help myself, I'm in deep trouble. And then I am much more reactive. My husband can almost tell that
Really,
I miss the medication window
it's
because
irritable and
I'm
yeah.
just like, he's like, just because you're not a dog. It's like I always growl before I bite, but I snap pretty fast. And he's just like, oh, there we go. So everything can set us off. So I think that we're going to find that when dogs have this constant pain, that their nervous system is in a state of alarm.
Yeah,
Um, everything's a trigger. It's
yeah.
heightened sensitivity. And what do you think, Nikki? I think dogs get headaches. I
Oh,
think
you see it in their faces sometimes.
absolutely.
They just, the whole just crumpled up and then heads like this, and yeah,
Look just like a
just
person
know
with
your
a
own
headache,
dog. You can
just
see
like
it, can't
right.
you?
And
Yeah,
sometimes massage helps, and sometimes it can be also from, holding themselves from arthritis. It just starts to stress. And once you build up
yeah,
tension in the neck and stuff, it's like, oh, honey. And
yeah.
sometimes I talk to vets, they're like, I don't think dogs get headaches. I'm like, why
No,
would
they
they not?
don't. And how would you know? It's not as if they're just going to say, well, they can't, can they? Everything has to be, we have to observe, and observations can just tell you so much. You're a detective, aren't you? But a
That's
lot of the clues are right there in front of you if you are willing to recognize them.
that's what I would say to everybody listening. If you're a vet, then stretch yourself and become better observers. Ask
Yeah,
different questions, about people, even simple things like watching the dog get up from laying down.
yeah,
How long does he choose to sit before he slides into a different position? Does he never sit? There's multiple reasons that can cause that, but those are really important clues. But for all of us out there being advocates for our dog, we have to first and foremost be the Sherlock Holmes. We have to be the detectives. It's like, I know, doctor, I understand you said that. This is what I'm seeing. And nowadays, everybody has a freaking camera in their
yes,
hand, and
yeah,
almost every cell phone nowadays can do slow mo.
yeah,
So it's like capture it, because sometimes your vet will be like, oh, well, he didn't do that in the office. It's like,
mm,
no, he didn't, because you were worrying him and he hates the vets and the floors are slippery and,
yeah,
5,000 other reasons. But at home, see what I mean?
yeah.
Or
And you
the
want to be
int
taking videos of everything, don't you? Because
I
also
know.
you want a
Post everything on
baseline. You
Facebook.
want to see them
Exactly.
pooing, see them going upstairs into the car from the side, from the back.
Exactly.
You might think it doesn't mean anything, but it does. And then actually, when you come to see the vet or the behaviourist, then they're going to kind of know where they want to look more specifically, or get them to do certain movements based on what they've seen on those videos. So yeah, it's really good. And on Cam, we are building up a library of owner videos, so people can come and have a look at them, and because it is so much information, so much more than you're ever going to get from a blood test or just X-rays alone. You have to have
Right.
everything together,
So
like
I
Laura's
have,
jigsaw
yeah,
puzzle.
I've got an application that I've been developing forever. We won't discuss why it took so long, but it'll be ready to go hopefully by mid-year. It's called FAT, Functional Assessment Tracking. And so
Okay.
it looks at the dog cognitively, physiologically, and socially. So on
Uh-huh.
the physiological level, urination, defecation, drinking, eating, sleep and rest, mobility and pain. So it's a
Yeah.
guided questionnaire that you answer, and then it scores it in a very clear graphic: red, green, yellow.
Okay.
Um, Yeah, so you're like, so a vet could look at that and say, "Tell me more about this." And
Yeah.
that includes stuff like, what's the defecation posture? He walks while he's pooing.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean,
Why?
that's a common thing, isn't it, with arthritic
Right.
dogs?
His knees are painful. I mean, it sounds so crazy, but how a dog defecates can tell you a great deal
Yeah.
about whether or not he's got some arthritis cooking along,
Yeah.
because he can't actually get in the posture to do what's most effective. When you watch a wild animal, like a coyote or a fox or a wolf, it's an intensely tight, tough
It is.
squat. All those muscles are meant to make it as easy as possible
Yeah.
for clear, easy evacuation. And you don't see that. You have dogs that can barely get into the posture, and then they're trying to walk and poop and walk and poop. And that's actually a signalment. Like, we may need to investigate further. So I'm hoping FAT will give vets and anyone caretaker a way to answer this, score it, and then you can say, "Tell me more about this. Why is his sleep deteriorating?" It's like, unless he's got a nice big, those Barker beds. I have several.
Oh, do you? Yeah.
I love them. Except I gotta say, I have one next to my side of the bed, and there's one next to my husband's side of the bed. And the older we get, the more we think like we're gymnasts in the morning, because when you step on them, it's not the best thing for old arthritic bodies. We're like, whoa, I stuck my landing. It's just how we get out of bed every morning.
It's good for your balance. It's really good for you.
Yeah, exactly. Since I have vertigo and migraines, it's not always my favorite way to get up, but it makes my dog comfortable, so that's fine.
No, the app sounds really interesting also for when you start your rehab or your whatever you're going to do, as a way of checking in once a week and seeing, am I having a good week? Am I having a bad week? What's going on? What do I need to tweak here or there to make it better again? That sounds really useful.
Yeah, so it actually lets you track the progress. You could do one every day. You could do one every month, every week, whatever it was you wanted to do. And then you can also change the cognitive stuff. It's like, you know what? He is more comfortable being left alone now. Or like the dog she just asked about. Yes, he's not barking. He is sleeping without interruption. He's not as responsive and reactive to everything there. So it lets you actually compare, are we on the right track? Or, Smith, I haven't seen you in 6 months. Thanks for bringing Laddie in, but there's a change here, and it will pinpoint. You can literally click on it. It'll show you what created the score, so that you have talking points of what's going on. What are the changes? Or maybe let's take him outside for a walk in the parking lot, and let's take a look at that. Or could you capture that on video for me at home? You can see it. But it provides a record. It sets a baseline. It can show you deterioration, and it does it at a fairly, very detailed level, which then makes whoever's filling the form out a far better observer.
Yes.
Because they're like, oh, I didn't even think to look at that. Like, I didn't
But
realize.
people want to. They want to have the information. They want to have those tools. And if they're there, it's just going to improve dogs' lives so much from if you think about it, like 20 years ago to what dogs' lives are like now. We had sort of one anti-inflammatory that we used, and we had some other tablets that are no longer made anymore, and that was it. There were no supplements. There was no, like you've said, it's so different now. And people like yourself are just constantly bringing new things out and working on stuff that to share with everyone else. And everyone wants to do it. I mean, we have so many people in our Holly's Army group, owners of arthritic dogs, and that just goes to show they just want that information. So if it's there and you've got these good tools, I think it would be amazing.
Yep, because it lets you just, you think, a friend of mine was using one of the beta versions of it, and she could not figure out, the dog was seizing, and she's like, I don't know what's triggering it. I don't know when they're coming. So she just began filling out the fat assessment. Through that, she found out the day before his seizures, he always went off his food. He always went off his food, and he withdrew from playing with the other dogs.
Yeah. So she knew that because she'd monitored it.
As soon as he left some of his dinner, and he just moved himself out of the line of play and said, no, I'll just be on the deck, or I'll just be over here on this bed.
Yeah.
Know that the next day that was coming. Right. So it could be as subtle as that. Or, as you said, is this normal? Or, oh, well, last time you were here, Mrs. Smith, Laddie could get in and out of the vehicle with no help. And But now when he gets up, he's a little wobbly, or if you're going upstairs, you and your husband have to support him so he can get upstairs. Like, we need to talk about this. So that will offer great talking points, but also a way to track it.
Yeah.
In a way that it's a graphic, so there's no missing it. It's a circle that shows you 19 different functions, and you're like, tell me more about this.
That's really good. So when is that going to be available? Do we know?
Hopefully, unless my developers go to the moon or something, which they're not supposed to, that I know of. Hopefully, midsummer.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so we're super excited, and I'll
we'll
be
keep our eyes peeled, because we're just getting questions now about that. Looking forward to the app. Needs to go for dinner. And then another one, when will it be ready? Will it be expensive? When we get more information, we'll
it will not be terribly expensive. So there'll be like a
just frozen right at the really important part. We'll just wait to see if Suzanne just come back in a minute. I'm going to give her a few seconds just to see if she comes back again. I'm guessing her screen is just getting little dots around. I will put more information about what Suzanne's work and her website on our Cam Live afterwards. And when we get more information about the app, then we will put that on as well. I don't know if she's going to come back. Yeah, I'm not sure. Anyway, thank you everyone for coming and for listening this evening. If Suzanne doesn't come back, or she's gone, I will get more information. If anyone has any questions, please pop them down and I will come on to them. She's back. She's back.
From the bad internet of farms across America. Yes,
I was just saying, so I think Suzanne's gone. She's had enough.
So quick answer to that previous question. No, it will not be expensive. And we'll have everything from a pet owner subscription for just, 1 or 2 or 3 dogs to full-blown professionals that want it for all of their clients. And then it's just charged by the dog.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's an online thing. You can do it on your cell phone. You can do it on an app, whatever. But no, it's meant to be reasonably affordable and almost like a no-brainer. Like, well, why would we not have this?
Just add it into our management, just as we would all the other things that we're using.
Well, it'll save you time too. It's like if the clients are, before we see each other again, let's do this.
Yeah.
Or that famous sentence that vets hate. How's Laddie doing? Oh, he's fine.
Yeah. Doesn't
fine is not an answer. So it's like, so that's great. If you could fill this out, then we could discuss it. Then we have a good answer to how is Laddie doing?
Yeah.
Because they don't know either. They're like, oh, he's fine. He's not screaming or bleeding. So he's all right.
Isn't it? Whereas this is going to make it more objective. So you'll have something to work
with. Much more qualified. It's like, this is what it is. So yeah, it's not meant to be super expensive. It's meant to be affordable and just a must-have for serious professionals and for the really dedicated owner, for sure.
Sounds brilliant. We'll have you back on when it comes back out.
Oh, that'd be awesome. That'd be great. We can
thank
show
you
it
so
off.
much, Suzanne, for joining us this evening. I've just said, but while you were just having your little tea break, then I just said if anyone has any questions, just to pop them down, and I'll be able to answer them or email Suzanne and hopefully answer those. But everyone's just written, thank you so much. Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to rewatch this later. Really informative. So thank you so much. And
thank you so much.
To talk to us.
Anytime. And again, thank you all for all the great work you're doing, because I think it's just going to make for a better future for the dogs.
Definitely. Have a lovely evening, everyone. See you soon.
Bye.